Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the concluding Knowledge Hub session of day 3 of the Virtual Travel Retail Expo. And we've saved one of the very best, and certainly most important, to last. We've themed it putting sustainability, diversity, and inclusion at the top of the corporate agenda. Now, in that context, I'm very happy to note that those 3 critical terms have been voiced many times this week by some of the business leaders who've been presenting, many of them, in fact, and that is encouraging. These issues are not some kind of nice to haves on big business agendas, or small and medium businesses for that matter. They must be right at the top of the corporate or company agenda. Consumers demand it, shareholders demand it, employees demand it. Well, I'm here in our 76th floor studio in late night Hong Kong, having survived Cyclone Tampuzo, and I'm delighted to welcome Kim Marotta, Vice President, Global Environmental Sustainability, who's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in a few moments, we're also going to welcome Victoria Russell, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer in Louisville, Kentucky, both from Beam Suntory, a world leader in the premium spirits sector, of course, known to most in this audience, boasting a marvelous portfolio ranging from Jim Beam bourbon and the multiple Suntory whiskey brands, of course, but a whole host of other great brands, from Bowmore, which I know very well, to Maker's Mark, which I've got to say, I'm biased, I adore it, to Courvoisier, and a whole host of other great international and regional labels. But Beam Suntory is about much more than selling brands. Go to its website, as I did today, and I saw the homepage talks of a performance objective of being the world's most admired, as well as its fastest growing premium spirits company, and a vision of growing for good. Beam Suntory has stepped up its commitment to what it sees as key environmental, social, and corporate governance principles. And both our speakers tonight will outline why such a corporate agenda matters more than ever. So we're going to start with a presentation from Kim. Kim joined Beam Suntory just in June this year after a 17-year career at Molson Coors Brewing Company. That explains the Milwaukee reference, I've learned, most latterly as Global Senior Director, Sustainability and Enterprise Risk Management there. She's a recognized leader in the areas of global corporate affairs, environmental, social, and governance and sustainability, and ranks very highly, by the way, in the Ascent Top 100 corporate social responsibility influencers for the last couple of years. That's a benchmark ranking of leaders who embody CSR and use their influence to help others establish or improve their CSR program. A very important benchmark. Kim, great to have you with us. The floor, the virtual floor that is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. I really appreciate that kind introduction. And good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone. It's really great to be with you today. I'm excited to talk to you about Climate Positive, our strategy at Beam Suntory, and share some information with you. I just want to do a tech check and make sure that we can all see the screen perfectly. Great. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Beam Suntory. As Martin mentioned, we're a relatively new company, and I'm relatively new to the business, but I've been in the alcohol industry for quite some time. Beam Suntory, well, it was created in 2014 when we were acquired by Suntory Holdings, is now the combined world leader in bourbon and the pioneer in Japanese whiskey. And we're also one of the world's largest premium spirits company. And our brands, just like Martin mentioned, everything from Maker's Mark to Jim Beam to Yamasaki to Courvoisier, Bowmore, and more, are among many others, are born from what we often refer to as the blessings of nature. And to put that in perspective, when you think about nature or you think about water, many of our distilleries were actually chosen based on the watersheds where they could be located. It's so important to whether it's our Maker's Mark, pure calcium, magnesium-rich water, or the water that flows through our crops, like in our cornfields and our grains and our wheat and our barley. So natural resources are not only essential to crafting our brands, but they often impart character and layers of flavor. But there's a delicate balance across the elements of the environment that we rely on that must be preserved and protected. And as you all well know, and you've probably heard throughout these meetings and presentations this week, the world as we know it is rapidly changing. And we have reached an inflection point. One of my favorite quotes is by David Attenborough, who said, "Climate change is the biggest threat to security that modern humans have ever faced." So simply put, business as usual may mean no business at all. So the world and the world of business needs to change. We need to ensure that profits are pursued just as aggressively as what is good for the planet and humanity. And consumers are demanding it. You've probably heard it through presentation and presentation this week, and you certainly probably see it in your businesses day in and day out. But travelers and shoppers in particular are really keen and focused on the area of sustainability. They want to see brands that are demonstrating how they are making a positive impact. I pulled two quick quotes for you that I thought were worth sharing today. According to a recent study by the Tax Free World Association, over 70% of participants noted that they would be influenced by sustainability credentials when purchasing an item during their travels. And another one in a Booking.com global survey released in just June of this year said that nearly 83% of 29,000 respondents said that they found sustainable travel to be vital, with 61% of those noting that the pandemic has increased their interest in traveling sustainably. So you see it day in and day out. And we too at Beam Suntory share that vision with you and with our parent company, Suntory Holdings, about growing for good. And we're inspired by Suntory's commitment and mission to create harmony with people and nature. At its heart of growing for good, our vision recognizes the importance of inclusive growth, ensuring that our influence expands and so does our positive impact. And it rests on the very nature of sustainability. And while good corporate citizenship has been fundamental to our business for a long time, we recognized an opportunity to take a transformative leap forward to ensure sustainability was embedded in all aspects of our business, across our entire value chain, and what we like to affectionately refer to as from seed to sip. So let me really quickly talk to you about our Proof Positive strategy. We just launched it earlier this year, and it acts as our roadmap to live our values and contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future in the decades to come. And what I like the best is this quote right here that we have from our CEO. Making an impact on the planet, our consumers and companies isn't just the right thing to do. It's a must do for the sustainability of our business and our humanity. Let's look real quickly at our Proof Positive strategy. It's built on 3 pillars: nature positive, consumer positive, and community positive. And just like any other global strategy, it's really rooted in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the nature positive strategy, and a little bit in a few minutes, Victoria Russell's going to follow and talk to you a little bit more about the community positive strategy. But with each of these ambitions, we have long-term priorities, 2030 and 2040. We have ambitious and measurable goals, and they're representing an investment over $1 billion over the next 10 years. So if we can, let's look at the nature positive goals in particular. In this area, we focus on water positive, climate positive, forest and farm positive, and packaging positive. So give you perspective of what that looks like. When we talk about water positive, it's certainly about reducing the amount of water we use within our own distilleries and operations by 50%, but it's broader than that. It's about the watersheds, as I mentioned, where those distilleries are located. And we want to replenish more water than we use in our direct operations by 2040. And then when we look at climate positive, again, it's about our own house. It's our scope 1 and our scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions and reducing those by 50%. But then it's about science-based targets initiatives and hitting that net zero in advance of 2050, and in fact, by 2040 across our entire value chain. And I should point out, we're really proud that our scope 1, scope 2 emissions have been approved by the Science-Based Target Initiative to meet the 1.5 degree climate scenario plan. When we look at forest and farm, again, this is big initiatives. It's about planting more trees than we harvest to make whiskey barrels. And we use a lot of great trees and great oak to make our predominant whiskey barrels. And it's working with suppliers that use sustainable practices. And packaging, which is really foremost, probably what you see more often when you're thinking about the shelves, when you're thinking about point of sale, when you're thinking about all those materials. It's about committing to 100% recyclable packaging, hitting 40% recycled materials by weight by 2030, 60% by 2040, and 100% in our PET. So when we turn now and talk about nature positive, it's really part of the things I want to talk to you about today. It's not just about us. The way that we're really going to create change is we need to embed new capabilities within our business, but we need to build partnerships across our supply chain. That includes with our suppliers, it includes with our investors, and it certainly includes with retailers and other partners like you. At our company, we have a behavior that we often refer to as we over me, and this certainly applies to sustainability. We're already seeing that how when we work together cross-functionally or with peer companies and across sectors and with organizations, we have cascading positive impacts on our business and on our industry and of course on our communities. And I thought what might be helpful today is just share with you a few examples of some things that we're doing that we really wanted to highlight with this really esteemed group. So if we can, we'll go to the very first example. So many folks are trying to talk about or get their arms around Scope 3 emissions. Because when you look at your greenhouse gas emissions, many of us know that the Scope 3 represents a predominant part. So how do we work within our supply chain, as I mentioned, to reduce our Scope 3 emissions? Here's a pilot. We're just getting started, but we're really excited to share it with you today. It's in Europe, and it's with a company called Sender. The company utilizes a network of advanced fuels across Europe. And really, it's got a fancy term, hydrogenated, I can't even say it, vegetable oil, HVO, which is essentially reused McDonald's cooking oil that we can use and replace a biodiesel fuel. And we're going to start testing it on roads from Netherlands to Germany. This will absolutely be substituted for fossil fuel in all diesel engines without any engine modifications. And really, most importantly for us and for our partners, it will help us deliver carbon reductions of up to 90% compared to fossil diesel. And it'll prevent 109 tons of emissions in the next 12 months, which, everybody always wants to know what that equivalent is. So we mapped it out. It's equivalent to 440 flights from London to Berlin. If we can, we'll go to the next example again, staying with our supply chain and our supply chain partners. This is a new pilot also that we're looking at to really grow a sustainable bourbon. And when we think about bourbon, it's all about the corn that we use to help grow our really great tasting bourbon. So we're launching a pilot with the Nature Conservancy and our corn growers in the state of Kentucky that's really going to focus on 3 phases. First, about reducing water pollution while increasing water storage, increased resistance to weather extremes, which certainly with climate change, we're seeing more and more across our crops and across our commodities, decreasing our dependency on chemicals like phosphorus and nitrogen and the like, and then getting to the point where we can sequester carbon, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and build fertility for future generations. We'll turn now to packaging, an area that, as I mentioned before, we're really excited about. As we start to introduce some PET, obviously recognizing what that looks like and the impact that it has is really key. So we started to produce our own preforms, which helps us reduce the reliance on some of our suppliers. And it also helps us lightweight some of our bottles. We're now on track to reduce nearly 300,000 pounds of plastic in our 2021 in Frankfort, Kentucky. We're also working to introduce more recycled content in our PET and eventually globally. This year, we launched our first products with 10% rPET, but we know that's just the start. And we've been testing percentages from 30% to 50% to 100%, obviously meeting our ultimate goal of 100% rPET. So on our way, and we're excited. One more example in our packaging area that we're also testing. We know how important it is to you and to our customers to understand the life cycle assessment or the impact that our products have on greenhouse gas emissions. So we're testing a new tool. It's called Compass, or with a company called Compass. And what you can do with this software is you can leverage data to understand the impacts of our existing or new packaging solutions. So if we're going to change out a cap, we're going to make a change to our point of sale, or any other changes that we'll see within packaging, it will help us take into consideration water usage, supply chains, and greenhouse gas emissions. It also gives us a really quick comparative look across locations and helps us unearth new solutions. So we recognize, and I know you recognize, it's incredibly helpful to understand the impact across all scenarios, across marketing strategies, across marketing schemes, and in working with partners and with retailers like you, so we can make really good and sustainable material and design choices. But then I can't miss this opportunity just to really talk about the brands. What's exciting about the spirits industry is obviously each distillery is unique to each brand. So I want to talk about some of our examples with Casa Sauza and Hornitos and Tequila, Maker's Mark, Arco, Courvoisier, and Sipsmith, but certainly many of our other brands are also activating in this space. So let me start just with Casa Sauza. I could give you plenty of examples. I can tell you that they have the lowest carbon footprint in the tequila industry, talk about how we're transitioning from fuel oil to natural gas, and how we're successfully reducing water. But I want to pull out one really great example that we're most proud of with Casa Sauza in Mexico. As you can imagine, we're positioned in the tequila watershed where water is so valuable and yet also so scarce. So being a good steward of our water and our environment is absolutely critical, not only for the communities where we operate, but certainly for the long-term viability of our own business and the tequila industry. So working across industry, we started a project called the Charco Bendito project. And this brings together 6 of our other beverage peers from the spirits industry to the beer industry and others to really focus on protecting that watershed. And we're implementing a variety of activities that help restore and protect that watershed with the long-term goal of restoring 21.5 hectares of land and focusing on improving quality and quantity of water, native vegetation, reforestation, soil conservation, and aquifer recharging. So we're in year 1 or 2 of this project, but really looking to continue to expand and grow. And another great example of how we all can collaborate and work together. Let me turn to Maker's Mark. Again, Martin mentioned, great tasting bourbon that comes out of our Loretto, Kentucky distillery. This is, being newer to this industry. I obviously have loved Maker's Mark for a long time, but I had an opportunity just a couple months ago to go and visit what you can see in this picture, this beautiful landscape and this beautiful distillery. And if you haven't had a chance, it's absolutely amazing. And when you think about a sustainable distillery, this is one that just epitomizes what sustainability means. Starting with really the brewery, looking at the bottom line of the brewery. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, the distillery. I'm so focused. I'm 17 years in beer. I can't get that brewery out of my vernacular. The distillery. So starting with the distillery. So they're seeking B Corp accreditation and have taken numerous actions. This is by no means any easy step, including a commitment to achieve zero waste to landfill by 2022. We have solar panels that are installed in our barrel warehouse. And what's really cool, again, to highlight one big example that you might not see in other areas, we have actually a gentleman. It always starts with one person, but a gentleman at Maker's Mark. His name is Brian Madley. And he has been working with the University of Kentucky and others in our Suntory, our parent company, and some of our industry partners to do work around really looking at the genome of the white oak. When you think of a bourbon barrel, it has to be a white oak tree. So preserving white oak for the long time is critical. And so being able to actually understand the first genome mapping of the tree, so you don't come in and have some disease that wipes out white oak across, the continent, but actually being able to preserve that and make white oak as sustainable, as strong, and preserving the genetic diversity for the long term is really critical. So a really great example that the Maker's Mark team is helping lead. Let me turn now and I'll jump across the countries and head over to France and take you over to Courvoisier, and again, this beautiful distillery in Jarnac. So when we look at that, this is the home place of Courvoisier. And Courvoisier has done numerous things to really make their brand and their product more sustainable. Reduce carbon emissions by really looking at leveraging high efficiency, low nitrogen oxide burners. We've shifted transport. So looking at all the aspects from shipping services, from diesel trucks to rail. We've made substantial packaging enhancements to reduce glass weight and package. And in recent years, we've really started to look at more sustainable farming practices. And one, again, highlight that I think is unique to our Courvoisier brand is we're exploring how bees and sheep can help improve biodiversity, even sponsoring 2 fields of wildflowers and 4 beehives with corporate and employee donations. And we also purchase wine from local eco-certified growers. So again, great example with a really great brand. And then the last brand, even though I could share some more, is our Sipsmith brand, which as a sustainability person is really near and dear to my heart. Not only are they seeking B Corp accreditation, but they have become a certified B Corp accreditation. And they're ultimately committed to being the best gin in the world. And so when we look at this, they've taken a holistic lens to sustainability with very ambitious goals, and they're making great strides. If you look at water, for example, they have a new cooling system. And so they can use recycled water and reduce their water consumption by 40% in their distillery. They're also intentionally supporting local community and reducing their environmental impact. 58% of their recent expenses were with local independent suppliers. So again, that notion of enhancing your community, giving back to community, and collaboration. None of the distillery waste is sent to landfill, and instead they partner to make sure that the waste produces energy through incineration. And all on-site electricity is produced by hydropower. Again, just some simple examples, but some really great efforts by our brands. So just to close, really want to tell you again that you hopefully it comes through that we're incredibly excited about the foundation we have and the ambitions we've laid out under our Proof Positive, particularly our Nature Positive, and you'll hear about our Community Positive strategy. And this is to increase our positive impact on nature, consumers, and communities. We have the benefit of a parent company that is a committed shareholder and the Beam Suntory leadership team and other passionate teams working around the world. We are now working to further ingrain sustainability into our strategies and the decisions from the start. So when we're building out brands, building out marketing strategies, making sure that it covers in. We only increasingly embed sustainability into our brands, and we want to work across our markets with partners like you and our channels, including particularly when it comes to GTR. So part of the work is already underway. As we like to say, we want to add more value, not more waste. So we're looking across not only our packaging design, but our VAPs, our displays, our overall activations to continue reducing our environmental impact and removing items like single-use plastic bags from bottles. We look forward to working with many of you to co-create solutions that are good for Beam Suntory and of course good for your business, along with our consumers and our communities, so we can together help create a more sustainable and equitable world and preserve the beauty of this world that we all very much rely on. So with that, I just want to thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to conversations and questions at the end.
Wow, Kim, bravo, bravo, bravo. What an amazing presentation. I love the scope of what you're doing and, across the whole company, the buy-in from the highest level, the commitment from the highest level of the company. And I like the sense of urgency, which came through very strong. It has to be now. There is no time to wait. Your country is burning in parts. We've seen the terrible catastrophes in America, but of course it's not just America. The world is in big trouble. And your products, as you very well pointed out, all those great spirits, they're made by men and women, but they all ultimately emanate from the land. So we have to look after our land and our water. You prompted, not surprisingly, a few questions from out there around the world, Kim. So I'm going to throw a couple of those at you. One is sustainability covers so many diverse areas, from environmental and social issues to the supply chain to climate change that I just referred to. How does Beam Suntory prioritize what it can and should do?
I think that's just a great question. And it really starts from the scratch and doing a materiality assessment. Just like any other business, if you did a financial materiality assessment that applies to the area of sustainability. So really looking at environmentally or from a community perspective or from a consumer perspective, what matters most? What's going to impact us in the long term? And where do our stakeholders expect us to act? And then when you do that materiality assessment and compare it with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and other priorities, it helps you focus on what makes the most sense for your business and where you can make the most impactful, most impact moving forward.
Yeah, you will have been asked this question numerous times, but it's an important one to keep restating. Is there a tension between business for good and business for growth? Because acting responsibility responsibly doesn't come cheap, of course. So tell us about that balancing act, if indeed it is one.
I think it is a great question. And that's part of our very, vision and mission about growing for good. So when we look at growing for good, as I mentioned before, it's not just growing our business, growing our volume, or growing our market share. It's really growing for the future, making sure we can be sustainable, because we can sell all the maker's mark we want, but if we don't have access to water, we're not going to be able to grow. Or we can sell all the great sipsmith we want, but if we're not really looking at the impact that we have on the communities when we're using these precious commodities or putting packaging out into the environment, we're not going to be growing for good. So while there's a tension, they need to be parallel and they need to be aligned.
Yeah, we both talked about the fact that consumers now not just expect, they demand responsibility from the brands that they will or maybe won't procure if they don't see that sense of responsibility. How are you communicating to the consumer all this great work you're doing?
Yeah, and we're on a path. So the good part is that we don't have to think of things that we need to communicate. Part of the reason I wanted to share some of the great things that are happening behind the scenes with our brands, just part of our DNA. It's how we produce these great brands. It's how our distilleries work. And so now we have that opportunity to share all that great information with your group, with GTR, and with our consumers, and talk about what it means to be B Corp, or what it means to sustainably grow, or what it means to have sustainable packaging. So hopefully you'll see even more in the years to come, months to come, maybe days to come.
Okay, final question just on travel retail. It's a very conspicuous industry, isn't it? By its very nature, it's associated by definition with the travel industry. It gets a lot of bad press. We're out there selling your outstanding products in airport environments, principally. Do you think that travel retail has a particular role to play in obviously embracing sustainability, but also, I suppose, in communicating to this kind of constantly evolving crossroads of humanity that's out there, that are coming and going, who are your domestic market consumers at the end of the day? Do you think you can use the travel channel to articulate in some way these beautiful principles that you've adopted?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the areas that makes me most excited, just the opportunity for us to be able to collaborate. The last question was, how do you talk to consumers? Well, we talk to our consumers just through, partnerships with you. And how do we really build those partnerships? We both have, or we all have, same goals and same ambitions. So working together to help get those messages out and make a difference is really just such a great opportunity.
All right. And one to close, just come in via the chat. How do you monitor the practices of your partners? You talked about that across your supply chain. It's no easy task, I suspect.
It is no easy task. First, it just starts with finding out what are the right questions that you want to ask. The last thing you want to do is send one more survey out to one more supply chain partner. So we really focused, particularly around greenhouse gas emissions and making sure we're getting the information in pack type or from our agriculture partners and transportation and logistics partners. But then it's also about a responsible and ethical supply chain and making sure we're monitoring human rights and really understanding what's happening within our supply chain. Because just like, our retail partners, our supply chain partners represent us. They're an extension of us. And we want to make sure we do business well together.
All right, Kim. Well, listen, thank you so much for outstanding presentation. Keep doing this amazing work, because we need companies like Beam Suntory to be showing us the way. And I think you're doing exactly that with a passion. So congratulations on that. And we look forward to staying in touch and monitoring all these exciting developments going forward.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here today. It was really great to meet you and to be part of this really important summit. So appreciate it.
It's been great. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so much food for thought there, wasn't there? Well, we're going to bring Victoria Russell in now. And it's Victoria with a beautifully appropriate backdrop behind her. Love that, Victoria. Now, Victoria also joined Beam Suntory this year, in her case in January, coming from a near 15-year career with restaurant group Papa John's International, where, again, most latterly, she was Chief of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. And notably, She has been Suntory's first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. So that's a landmark for Beam Suntory, important one. In this newly created role, Victoria joins the company's senior leadership team. That's important. She leads diversity and inclusion across talent acquisition, career development, important, employee retention, marketing, community relations, and building organizational capability to better recognize bias and to further drive an inclusive mindset. Victoria also supports the development of diversity guidelines for the company's supplier base, to come back to the question we were just asked before, and I'll ask you about that in a moment, Victoria, how you monitor that. And she champions employee impact groups and leaders across the business. As I said before, she joined Beam Suntory, had a successful, very successful career at Papa John's, and became the first executive to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she step changed the company and its actions to build a diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization across a vast organization, I may point out. So, Victoria, wonderful to have you with us all the way from Louisville, Kentucky. The floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Martin, for that introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today to speak to you about Beam Suntory's journey to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. First, I want to step back into time for just a moment, into 2020. 2020 was an inflection point for all of us. We saw the global pandemic continue to surge, and we continue to see its lasting impacts as businesses around the world have been forced to close their doors and marginalized communities have suffered. We were also witness to a global social justice movement that prompted all of us to reflect and ask ourselves three things. What actions will we take to address the systemic issues that have been pre-existing for so long? How can we change our work cultures and environments to ensure everyone has both a seat at the table and a voice? How do we create a culture and environment where every single person can grow, develop, and thrive? Now, COVID-19 has laid bare to the imperative to proactively plan and prepare our future economy shocks. If we'll advance to the next slide. From climate change to economic insecurity to racial and social injustice, the pandemic has brought looming global crises and stark focus and reaffirmed the important role we must play to address and positively impact society's most urgent challenges. Now we're seeing the case for diversity, equity, and inclusion is stronger than ever. And we're seeing more companies around the world prioritizing D&I and investing behind these efforts. It's because data is showing us that diverse companies are more likely to financially outperform their peers. To take a step further, we see the power of purpose and how when you're able to get this right, employees are more engaged and it becomes a critical part of attracting and retaining talent. But this goes beyond diversity. It's really about equity. And that's new for some of us as we explore diversity, equity, and inclusion. Equity is the fair treatment of all people to ensure full participation, access, opportunity, and advancement. It's about understanding where disparities exist and how to address those needs of our employees. It's also about inclusion and understanding, and this is really important, that inclusion means all of us. It's not just certain demographics or communities. It's how we create an inclusive environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and feels they can make a positive impact within the workforce, the workplace, and our communities. In the end, the result of DEI is belonging. And when our people can fully engage, where innovation thrives and their views, beliefs, and values are integrated. Now, as Kim shared, Beam Suntory launched its Proof Positive earlier this year to act as a roadmap to our lives and live our values and contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future. The strategy includes our community positive pillar, in which we're committed to fostering a more inclusive and equitable culture while working to increase gender, racial, and ethnic representation across our business and volunteer our time to positively impact society and the environment. I'm going to walk you through the three pillars of our community positive. The first is equity. We aim to reach 50% women in leadership positions globally and 45% racial and ethnic diversity representation in the US and achieve industry-leading sense of belonging among our employees by 2030. Now, I'm really pleased to share that this focus and intentional efforts around our talent decisions have increased diverse representation at the top of the organization, with meaningful movement among our senior leadership team in 2021. Female and multicultural representation of our SLT has increased, driven by both internal movements and external hires. That's something we really need to be mindful of, right? The blend of recruitment and retention of our employees. Additional movement has happened across the organization at all levels, thanks to a sharp focus among our leaders and recruitment programs. In the US, gender diversity has actually increased to 52%, and ethnic diversity to almost 30%, up from 24% last year. These movements send a strong signal to our employees around the organization about our commitment to D&I, and the focus must now be continued around attraction, development, and retention of that talent. Inherent talent moves as a result of our global headquarter move to New York has also presented a unique opportunity for us to make further progress in diverse hiring. Year to date, in our New York market, we've actually have been recruiting female talent at 63% and 48% for multicultural. We believe this is an excellent proof point of what can be achieved when we are intentionally focused on moving the dial. Now, with regard to volunteering and philanthropy, we support employees in giving back. Let's go back one slide, sorry. We support our employees in giving back 1 million volunteer hours by 2030 to our communities around the world, using their skills and passions and 3 volunteer paid days off. This includes volunteering for causes meaningful to them and their communities, and engaging in social activism. We also invest in initiatives and organizations that support on-trade partners, build stronger communities, and promote social justice. I'd like to share a few examples of these initiatives and how we've seen the strategy come to life. The first example touches on our equity pillar and how we're supporting our people within our walls by working on fostering inclusion through robust partnerships with our employee impact groups and local DEI advocate groups to create safe spaces, facilitating open, honest conversation. I think is critical, right? So courageous conversations, being open, honest, and transparent is how we're going to drive change throughout our organization. Suntory has actually established 12 dedicated employee groups that represent and support dimensions of diversity and are helping fuel a more inclusive culture and affect positive change in our communities and the way we build our brands. Together, guided by the company's values, Suntory is partnering with the EIGs to create action plans to better serve our customers, our consumers, and our communities while strengthening Suntory from within. The second is around our volunteering goal and how we're helping contribute 1 million cumulative volunteer hours to communities around the world by 2030. One of these ways we're doing this is through our Suntory Cares program, which gives employees 3 paid days to volunteer with their colleagues, support causes most important to them and their communities, and engage in social activism. Another way we're furthering our collective impact is through Together for Good, which is Suntory's annual global service event, which brings together our employees around the world to volunteer in ways and with volunteer activities aligned to our proof positive pillars. Next, it's providing relief to our on-trade partners who have been a part of the community positive pillar of our sustainability strategy. We are incredibly proud of the ways our teams responded through the pandemic. At every step of the way, we put our people, partners, and communities first. Our teams urgently repurposed facilities in Kentucky, Japan, Spain, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and Mexico to produce enough sanitizer solution to clean more than 50 million pairs of hands. Through more than 3 million in global donations and partnerships, we've supported restaurants and bar workers and their families across numerous markets. This includes our Maker's Mark partnership with the Lee Initiative Restaurant Reboot Relief Program and Restaurant Workers Relief Programs, which donated more than 1 million meals to restaurant workers in the US. The company's Shift Meals to Go program, supporting the US hospitality workers and their families, supporting the food and beverage community, and marketing markets like India to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. As the lockdown of restaurants and bars persisted across India to maintain social distancing, several thousand members of our hospitality community have been affected financially. Beam Suntory India partnered with the National Restaurant Association of India, the largest restaurant body in the country, to provide support relief to thousands of staff members and restaurants and their families during this period of the lockdown. Now, we've continued to invest in initiatives and organizations that support building stronger communities and promote social justice. This includes Hornito's partnership with the League of United Latin American Citizens and We Are All Human to fuel a Fair Shot program that aims to empower and support aspiring immigrants on their journey to U.S. citizenship and providing comprehensive information kits designed to make crucial information accessible to Spanish-speaking communities across the U.S. during the pandemic. Cavassier and the National Urban League have partnered to support Black-owned businesses. Together, they have created a platform aimed at empowering and positively impacting small businesses and entrepreneurs in historically underserved urban communities through financial assistance and professional programs. Now, while we have a lot to be proud of, and we do, we are on a journey in continuing to create an inclusive environment in which everyone can show up as their unique selves and be empowered to contribute to the greater good. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and I believe it's one of the best representations of what this journey really looks like. She said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." This is an evolution. There isn't a destination or a place we're going to arrive. This is not a check the box. We need to continue to evolve, grow, and adapt to change. As we look to the future, it's important we take lessons from where we've experienced both as individuals and as a collective. We've seen the power of the collective and the positive impact it can make when it comes to working together. From a D&I perspective, it's about knowing what's in our power to do something differently and create a more equitable environment for everyone, where we can embrace individualities, our diverse thoughts, perspectives, ideas, everything that makes us unique. That is how you truly get the best out of your teams. That's where innovation and growth thrives, so we can all be successful. Now, as we look to achieve our D&I goals for Beam Suntory, we built a strategy around 3 strategic priorities. The first is leveraging data and insights. Talent analytics is critical to understanding where disparities lie within your workforce and aids in prioritizing where the focus should be based on fact, not feeling. Data transparency can help establish accountability and ensure the organization is more intentional in meeting its D&I success metrics. The second is a top-down D&I competency building. We are building an organization that clearly understands our desired DEI behaviors and can demonstrate it regularly. This must start at the top. So we're creating executive role models who demonstrate Beam Suntory's commitment to understanding and living our DEI principles. We're increasing awareness and cultural competencies across the organization and work to better equip our leaders to lead inclusively. The third is how we're embedding DEI into the DNA of the organization. This involves the implementation and communication of our D&I strategy and work streams across the organization and a shared responsibility and ownership. If this is truly going to be effective, it's going to take all of us. Next, I'll walk through some of our focus areas, and they're in 3 key areas around our workforce, our workplace, and the marketplace. Our workforce is all about our people, right? This is how we house our diversity and equity efforts. This includes our D&I metrics and scorecard that I spoke about, attracting, recruiting, and retaining talent, our talent development processes, and people processes. Now, within the workplace, that's our culture. Are we creating an inclusive culture? Is it a place everyone belongs, and are they fully engaged? That will include work streams around our top-down executive leadership ownership, our employee-led initiatives, and building an organization that lives DEI. And then last, it's the marketplace. That's around our BSI brand, consumers, suppliers, and community. So our proof positive and engagement work that we're doing is housed there, and as well as our supplier diversity initiatives, our future-proofing the BSI brand, and all of this, which is foundational, is how we're going to communicate that, ensure accountability, and measure. On our journey in creating a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment, where everyone is valued, respected, and empowered to contribute to the greater good and a more sustainable and equitable future. I'm going to share with you a little bit more. Let's advance to the next slide. This is going to take all of us across industries coming together to create a more diverse and equitable and inclusive and lasting positive impact within our communities. One example I'd love is this year's Cinderella Whiskey Fair, which is the largest floating whiskey trade show that has historically been largely attended by mostly men. This year, the team challenged themselves to think more inclusively and ask themselves how they could increase women representation, engagement, and participation in this large-scale event. To do this, they hosted a masterclass led by Women in Whiskey, aimed at celebrating and highlighting women's contributions and leadership in the world of whiskey, while highlighting whiskeys with deep connections with women distillers and founders. They also hosted a forum that promoted discussions on key topics within the whiskey industry, as well as reflecting around how we create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for women in whiskey. This is an example of how we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion within our industries, including GTR. That's how we invite others to the table and have these open, honest conversations, making everyone feel welcome. We have an opportunity to think about how we speak to diverse consumers, whether that's when they're enjoying our spirits or traveling, how we truly inspire human connection. Now, before I close, I want to share how proud I am of the commitments we've made to further support our people, our partners, and our communities. We're on a journey in creating an inclusive environment where everyone is valued, respected, and empowered to contribute to the greater good. We recognize the power of this moment and the opportunity to reset and come together as a collective to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive world and make lasting impacts within our communities. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Martin, to lead Q&A.
Oh, absolutely fantastic once more, Victoria. Thanks so much for that. We've got some questions coming in from the audience, but I just want to start with a couple of observations for a start. I liked your phrase about moving the dial. I liked an initiative there very much, the 3 volunteer paid days off. I'm not sure that's too common in among corporates. I think that's a wonderful initiative. So congratulations for that. I want to talk to you about the pandemic. We heard from a very good presentation last night from a group called Women in Travel Thrive, which traces it. It's a very new organization, and it traces its roots back to how a group of women in the travel community saw the pandemic disproportionately affecting women and women's jobs. Do you think the pandemic has reversed the positive tide in terms of the disparity between women and men in the workforce?
You know, honestly, I think it's added more light to it, right? And we're having more and more honest conversations of the impact on women in our workforce that's bringing all of that to light. And I think as we think about attracting and retaining talent, it's definitely become an imperative, right, for the business and how we do that. So I think as organizations have set these success metrics around women in leadership and diversifying our workforce, this is where we have to be very intentional and mindful, not just on recruitment, but retention and how that's going to evolve and what that's going to take, right, to understand the needs of our employee base. And again, that's why this is a journey, right? It's going to continue to evolve. So understanding those needs and being in tune to those and creating a safe space where people can share and be honest about, right, what they're experiencing, and then how companies can adapt and pivot to those changing needs.
And your program, you're a global company. I can imagine that just rolling out it's more than a program. It's a deep-rooted philosophy, and more than a philosophy that must be put into practice and embraced at every level within your company. And you're going about that globally, are you?
Absolutely. So what was really important about our DE&I efforts is to work across all of our partners from a global perspective, including Suntory, to ensure that we're really acknowledging all the dimensions of diversity, right? And increasing awareness in all of those spaces is really key. This really gets back to, again, with inclusion, that this is truly all of us. I think a lot of times different communities can sometimes feel excluded or alienated, right, by D&I efforts, or feel like that it's not talking to them. And I think it's really important that we're mindful what's happening in all the regions, all the dimensions of diversity around the world. Now, I'll take that back to, again, the focus on data and insights, right? Understanding where some of your greatest disparities lie, that could be a global approach that you activate locally. And you might need to pivot, right, for different needs in different regions in different parts of the world. So we wanted to ensure that the three pillars that I shared, right, is something that everyone can coalesce around. A lot of times, and a lot of organizations are doing this, including ourselves, is the concept of gender plus one, right? So we know gender is something everyone can coalesce around the world. But when we think about the other dimensions of diversity and what that plus one could look like, it allows a little flexibility, right, for each market to say, for example, in the US, the focus on racial and ethnic diversity at 45%. That could look different in different parts of the world. So I think it's really important to step back and take that global approach to this.
Okay, a couple of questions from the audience, if I may, Victoria. One, thanks for a great presentation. We would all share that comment. What influences have previous roles and indeed life experiences had on you as a woman in the industry today?
That's a great question. So, I actually spent some time at Brown-Forman before my time at Papa John's. So it's been welcoming, refreshing to come back into the industry. I think what I notice as women in the industry, there's not a lot, right? But it is growing. And so how can companies and organizations keep having a very intentional focus and ensure that it's sustainable? One thing I love, and we saw this happen throughout 2020 and into 21, organizations are setting a lot of commitments in this space and verbalizing those commitments. And it's allowing, our consumers and our future employees even, and our current employees to hold us accountable to the commitments we're making to ensure that it's actually sustainable. For me in this industry as a woman, I want to see more people that look like me, right? More women in the industry. And I think representation, it's really important. It's hard to be what you can't see. A lot of times when you look up throughout the organization and you don't see representation, it could give the perception of this glass ceiling, right? And so what can we do to break that down and dismantle that within our organizations and create a space for everyone? Sometimes I've heard this analogy and I love it, right? So a lot of times there's this feeling or fear that it's a zero-sum game to include all of us. But if the table's not big enough, make it bigger, right? I kind of refer back to the old school dining room tables, put a leaf in it, right? Create space at the table so that everyone can participate and fully engage.
All right, another question here. What advice would you give to women who are considering a role in the drinks sector today?
I would say jump right in, right? I think a lot of times as women, we can second guess ourselves and we feel we have to be, and this is statistically supported, but have to be almost perfect, right? To take on something new. And I think companies are allowing more, and I hate to use the word risk, but in terms of giving other people a chance, looking at other things in your skill set and your background that can make you a viable candidate for roles that you may not have the traditional experience for, right? And so I think that's really, as we think to be more inclusive and diverse, how do we leverage those other skill sets that traditionally didn't show up in the resume or in the job description, right? How can we see that you possess certain skills and talents and whatnot that can make you truly successful? In addition, how are we ensuring that people are successful? So when we think about bringing you into the organization, do we just stop there or do we continue to monitor and track and push for the development of women in the industry and other diverse talent, right, within the industry to ensure we're all successful?
Yeah, and you did talk about the journey earlier on. I thought that was very apposite. You've come a long way, but there's a long way to go. And part of the reason, I suppose, there's a long way to go is what's happening in society as well. There is a lot of ugly stuff in society today, isn't there? There's an extreme nationalism has swept across much of the world. We've seen, the examples of racial injustice that you've talked about in the States, but not just in the States. At an England football match against Hungary this week, there were racist chants of the worst kind. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. The LGBT community in many countries, it's not just illegal, their lives are imperiled. Women, as we have seen, have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. There's the anti-immigrant mentality grows, I think, in a shocking way. in many, many countries in the world. So you're up against it in some senses. Society's progressive on the one hand, Victoria, isn't it? But there are very many elements that are regressive.
Yeah, I think a lot of those elements, just in recent times, people have just become more vocal. I think a lot of that existed before, and people are being more expressive in it. But on the positive, I think a lot of people are fed up, particularly younger and younger generations, right? You're starting to see this kind of blend of culture, acceptance within those groups, and support of one another. And so I think that's so critical that we lean into that, right? And continue to not have tolerance for it in the workplace. At what point do you say that this is the direction we're going? We're creating this inclusive culture. And if your values no longer align, I think people can self-select out. And that's going to continue to happen, but it's going to be really important. And I think about, again, younger and younger generations, it's a lot less values driven and more values driven, right? People want to work for and support organizations that are aligned to their values. And it's pushed companies a little bit more to be uncomfortable, or being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And taking a stand in a position and saying, this is the environment we're going to create, and hold everyone accountable. And as they continue to hire, people into the organization, a lot of companies are doing the trainings, the workshops, things of that nature, but it's becoming a business imperative that when you're recruiting, that do you have these inclusive behaviors as a leader, right? This is not something we're going to have to keep retraining. We're going to require it coming in. And we're asking those questions in the interview process. So I think we're going to keep seeing that evolution. And as I said, younger generations, particularly Gen Z, are frankly going to require it, right? Otherwise, they won't stay. And we're already seeing that trend, right, in terms of retention. People are going where they feel valued, where they feel respected, where they feel like they can actually bring their whole selves to work. And so I think that excites me, right, about the future, where we're going to keep pushing to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And more people are getting behind it.
Well, keep going, Victoria. It's fantastic. It's inspiring. I've so enjoyed hearing from you and Kim. And tonight, because it's been a long, long day here in Hong Kong. I started at about 5 this morning. It's coming on. It's gone past 11. I'll probably go and have a nightcap. I will probably have a little or maybe a large Maker's Mark, and I'll drink it, looking at it as well as tasting it. I'm going to think the people that are producing this fine whiskey, this fine bourbon, are doing the right thing. And so I commend you for that. Keep up the great work. Victoria Russell, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that outstanding? So we're going to close off day 3 now. Let me just close by prompting you to come and see us tomorrow at the start of the day, 0300 EST, 0900 CET, 1500 Beijing, Hong Kong, Singapore, and you can work out your other time zones from that, when I'm going to be hosting Julian Diaz, the CEO of Dufry, and the members of his global executive committee in an open session, an open and very candid session with the supply community, current suppliers, past suppliers, future suppliers, potential suppliers. And it's going to be a very candid discussion. We invite questions. You can send them to me at martin@moodie-davitt-report.com in advance. If you can't make it, you'll be able to watch it on demand if you missed that time slot. But it does promise to be a highlight of the week. Then again, I think we just saw one. Thanks for your attention today. It's been a fantastic day in the Knowledge Hub. See you tomorrow.